let's dive right into it. We're going to go with some high level education stuff about the space trends that you're seeing. We're going to dive into course design and how to make courses that people love. We'll talk about some growth tactics towards the end, and then cap it off with some audience questions. But we will go ahead and start with you, Wes. We used to live in an in-person first world. Then we shifted to this remote first world, and now it seems like the pendulum is swinging back to somewhere in between. Curious, what are some trends in the education space that you're seeing now, tail end of 2022 and going into 2023?
Yeah, well, I think with online education specifically, we're definitely seeing a trend towards interactive live courses that are more community driven than online courses have been previously. So if you think about the last 10, 15 years, the main format of online learning has been massively open online courses, so otherwise known as MOOCs, which are video-based courses. So these are the kinds of courses that you find on LinkedIn Learning, on Udemy, Coursera, Skillshare, and they're basically a bunch of pre-recorded videos that you watch by yourself. There's not a lot of interaction. There's no feedback. It's super easy to get distracted when you're in the middle of watching one of these videos. And the completion rate is super low. So 6 to 10% completion. There was a recent MIT study that said that might be as low as 3 to 6% completion. And so while these MOOCs opened up access to information and to great instructors and made courses and learning a lot more affordable, the engagement just really wasn't there. So I think that the thing that we're really seeing in the last couple of years, and I think in the next 5 years that will really continue growing, is this trend towards more interactive live learning, where we are really taking the best parts of online learning with the scale and accessibility and affordability, but combining it with the best parts of in-person learning, right? Like when you're in the same room with someone, breathing the same air, and you're riffing with each other, you're debating, you're discussing, you're reviewing each other's work, you're kind of tearing down some stuff and rewriting it together. That kind of collaboration and learning is something that we're now able to do. With the technology's there, the appetite is there. So so I've been seeing a lot more cohort-based courses that creators, experts are now starting to teach, which is really exciting.
Yeah, just to build on.
Do you have a sense of what the completion rate was? Sorry, Shane, to interrupt. The kind of before and after,
yes.
Like MOOCs versus,
Yes, totally. 75% on average completion for cohort-based courses. Yeah.
Wow, very cool. Go ahead, Shane.
Yeah, I was just going to say, to build on what Wes said, the technology is really enabling. Do you remember the Matrix? The first one where, they plug in this module. It's like, I need to learn Kung Fu. And,
yes.
You plug in this module and all of a sudden you learn Kung Fu. So what technology is also enabled right now is real-time skill acquisition on demand. So I need this skill. I'm at a roadblock. How do I acquire this skill right now in this moment? And to Wes's point, the traditional way of doing that was these MOOCs, where you would do this course and it would take 3, 4, 5, 6 months online at a pace that maybe you didn't always control, trying to find the material that you wanted. And now it's becoming a lot shorter. The intensity is higher, so the completion rate's higher, but you're also getting the skills that you're interested in the moment that you're interested in them.
And have you seen, Shane, you've spent a lot of time studying how people learn, like how is this shift that's happening because of technology matching up with sort of the psychology of how people learn?
Well, so it's really interesting because I'll just explain sort of my theory on how people learn and then map it to sort of how that's factoring into technology today. Yeah. And so the way that people traditionally think they learn is through an experience. And I don't think we learn from experience, because we all work with somebody who's had 20 years of experience, but it's the same year, just repeated over and over and over again. And so real learning comes when you take an experience, whether it's a conversation, you're reading a book, you do something, you have an action which causes an experience, and you reflect on it. And it's that reflection process that creates the learning. What worked, what didn't work, what could I have done better? Where are the edge cases? Where are the boundaries? And once you reflect on something, you create an abstraction. And the abstraction is, what will I do next time when I'm in this situation? What's my heuristic to sort of solve this problem? But embedded in that abstraction is all of these reflections that you have. And so the abstraction creates an action, and then you have this loop. So you have experience, reflection, abstraction, action, and it just cycles and cycles. And so when you have a real-time on-demand sort of course where you can get the information you need, you get the information and then you go put it into action. And so you get the opportunity to reflect on it right away. There's no distance between learning and getting the reflection. And then you can put it in the cycle and you can improve a lot quicker.
Can you tell me one example, kind of putting it through that framework that you outlined, of how that, like, kind of making it real for us?
Well, it's interesting because you think, like, we teach a lot of decision making, right? So people come to us when they're stuck with a decision. And so part of what we walk them through is, how do we make this decision? But how do we create this system where I can reflect on my decisions as I'm making them? And in part, you want to reflect before you make the decision. So you want to write it out. You want to think about it, put your thoughts into writing, because what's invisible can't be fixed, right? And often we don't understand something. So it's the act of encouraging that reflection that gives you the abstraction, helps you make the decision. And then you can go back and evaluate your own writing, your own sort of reflections, and see what you thought was valuable versus what is. So now you're getting real-time feedback or near real-time feedback in a way that allows you to go forward.
Got that. Wes, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I can offer another example. With Maven's courses, the learning and the doing are very much one and the same. So I have a framework called the learn, do cycle, whereas the old way was about learn, 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 do. The new way is learn, do, learn, do, learn, do. So you're constantly alternating between the two. So Shaan Puri has a course on Maven called Power Writing. And in the course, Shaan has everyone actually draft a couple headlines once he teaches you the ideal structure of a great, subject line or, tweet hook. He actually has you write down some yourself. So he might set a timer for 2 minutes. Everyone starts writing. And then at the end of those 2 minutes, everyone shares out what they came up with. And then Shaan will then pick from what everyone shared and do a live teardown to explain, all right, here's what you did right. I would trim this first half, move this here, remove this. So he's kind of sharing his thought process and everyone is able to learn from it. And then he might set another timer for another 2 minutes and then everyone takes that feedback in mind and then edits their own work. So there's a really tight feedback loop and you're not just passively consuming information about, how to write great headlines. You're actually writing them, and so often when you put something into practice, at first you think you get it, but then you try it and it doesn't work. It fails horribly, right? And you're like, okay, I definitely didn't get it as much as I thought I did, right? And it's through that putting into practice, that the motion of putting it into practice, that you then refine your knowledge and really learn that skill.
I just wanted to add something there to what Wes was saying. What you're seeing in real time with that is Shaan talking about his reflections, right? So he's reading your headline and then he's talking about what works, what doesn't work, why it works, why it doesn't work. And so you're actually learning from somebody else's reflections instead of their abstractions. So if learning from abstractions would be like, here's a headline that works, without telling me why it works, without telling me the fundamental reasons, like when wouldn't it work? When is it likely to work? When does it fall apart? And so when you get that feedback in real time, you accelerate your learning.
That's a nice segue to get into course design, because it seems like the type of education that you're talking about falls in the realm of skill building and yeah, so I think, would you categorize that as like specific to skill building, Wes?
Yeah, I suppose so. I mean, I think
Okay.
this kind of learning works for anything where feedback is useful and thinking about what you're learning and talking about what you're learning is useful, which I think is pretty much everything. So maybe skill building plus, I don't know, what are other categories of things that people want to learn?
Things that people learn. Yeah, I guess zooming out, if we look at the medium of these different like ways to educate, we have things like cohort-based courses, which are far more kind of like time and intensity heavy, versus sending a newsletter, weekly newsletter that goes out that also is like educating and useful and valuable. How do you think about the right, I guess, tool for the right job, right? Like how do you think about like what sort of medium works best in the context of education?
Yeah. I think with live courses, you really want to spend the time doing things that you can only do live. So if you are going to be talking at someone for, a long period of time and you're going to be monologuing, there's no reason that should be live. You might as well record it and, turn it into a video that people can watch on 1.5 X speed, or that they can watch on their own time, and then save that live portion for actually, doing activities that you can only do live. So I think thinking about what's the benefit of being live together, how do we lead into that? I think that's one thing to think about. I think the other is most course creators can't go straight to making an ask with asking someone to purchase their course. So usually you need to build up trust and credibility with your audience first. And that usually looks like sharing free content, whether that's in the form of a newsletter or posting on LinkedIn or on, posting tweet threads, podcasts, whatever it might be, really sharing and showing that you have value to offer for your audience. So I think it's sometimes, less, do you want to do free stuff versus paid stuff? I think it's just, you have to do free stuff, right? Because otherwise, if you show up on my doorstep and ask me for $1,500 for a course and I have no idea who you are, that's awkward and I'm not going to buy, right? So it's there's more of a practical component there too.
Anything to add, Shane?
No, I think Wes really nailed it there, right? You have to establish trust before you can. Why should I listen to you? Then to her point about what are the benefits, and you have to think about the medium and the benefits of the medium. So if you're teaching a course, what can we do online? What can we do in person? What can we do in a live session? And how do those different mediums mix to the content that I'm teaching and creating? So can I do the theory on a video that I might watch at 1.5x? And then I go to the class, and now I got questions, and those questions. So now we're less teaching directly the material or the theory. Maybe we're applying more in class. And it's by that application that you get the benefit more you can benefit from not only the instructor's experiences, but you can benefit from everybody else in the class's experiences as well. And then that helps cement sort of the edge cases and the boundary cases of learning. So it helps you understand the material at a deeper level.
Well, yeah, you touched on free versus paid, and that's something that we constantly get questions about. How do you think about categorizing your content, your courses, in the free bucket versus the paid bucket? And something that y'all touched on is kind of getting that initial affinity and like having people know who you are. Free can be a powerful lever in order to kind of get that trust with an audience. But how do you really think about the segregation of those two? Shane, why don't we start with you?
Yeah, I think, this is specific to people, right? So I think my answer is going to be different from Wes's, and it'll be different from everybody in the audience. We don't give away free courses. So if we put together a course, we're charging for it. We think the value's there. And we think most people who do that, it's sort of a trap, right? I'm giving you a free course because I want to sell you something later. And so we already have credibility, so we're not trying to establish credibility. So like I said, it's a different place for us to be teaching than if you're trying to set something up from scratch, where you might want to give away something free. You might want to establish your reputation. You might want to pull people in, demonstrate learning, create the social signal that you're getting, get the feedback, iterate your content, learn how to do it, because teaching is not easy either, right? The examples you use matter. The way that you position your content matters. And how do you get the feedback on that? If you're not, if you're putting it out there free, you might get the feedback. But if you're doing it behind the scenes where somebody's charging, you want to get as many people in there as possible so you can get better at what you're doing. And often it's the examples, again, the positioning, the pacing, the sort of materials that you have that go with the course, what actually supports what we're teaching, how does it all work together, how does it create the brand. Once I've done that for free, well, now maybe I can do it for money because I've demonstrated value, I've got the case studies, and I've shown people what I can do.
What for you, Shane? You've got Farnham Street Knowledge Project. Like, what has been that that free hook that's been like the most powerful lever for you as you've been going through your own growth?
Well, for us, it's the newsletter, right? We give away, we have a free newsletter. It goes out every Sunday. It goes over 500,000 people. We have an over 50% open rate, and we give away an amazing amount of content there. And it's really just me keeping a log over the week of what I found interesting and curious. What do I think is timeless? What did I read this week? And then that is the platform from which we establish and we build on from there. The Knowledge Project is sort of like Disney, right? If you think of Disney's all of these components, you find a component, you find a character, maybe it's on a lunchbox at a grocery store, and you're like, who is this character? And then all of a sudden you're watching the movie, then all of a sudden you're going to Disneyland. I kind of think of Farnham Street as the same thing. You can listen to the podcast, and then all of a sudden you're like, oh, this guy's got a newsletter too. He sounds really interesting. I'm going to go check out the newsletter. And then you subscribe to that. And I mean, we don't do any paid promotion or paid marketing. So we just grow 10 to 15% a year.
I'm excited to go from Farnham Street to Farnham World very soon. That's exciting. Wes, what about you? How do you think about free versus paid?
Yeah, I think with coming at it from a student perspective, people tend not to take free things as seriously. So, there's so many free resources out there on how to eat better, how to work out and get in shape, how to become a better marketer. And if all it took were access to free resources, we'd all be much better versions of ourselves. And so, yeah, so I think price can be a lever to keep ourselves accountable as students. I think of it a little bit like getting a personal trainer at the gym, where you've paid that person. If you cancel, they're not going to give you your money back, and so you've kind of forced yourself to show up. So I think there's definitely a benefit from the accountability side of it too.
Can I add one more point? Often free is about entertainment, whereas paid is about outcomes.
Free is about entertainment. Paid is about outcomes. That is
often.
Often, yes. But as a heuristic, that's super useful to think through. That's something we've struggled with internally at Demand Curve. Is like, hey, we put out these 100+ hour long playbooks versus we have our own paid content. How should we be thinking about that distinction? So that's a super useful heuristic about creating courses through the actual process of just creating educational products. How do you design courses and experiences that your audience is actually going to love? How do you think about that, Wes?
I have a framework that I call the content hierarchy of BS.
I knew you would have a framework.
Yeah, it's a triangle. It's a pyramid where the bottom of the pyramid is more BS and the top of the pyramid is less BS. And so what you find at the bottom are tweets, podcasts, keynote speeches. There's more room for BS because it's one directional. You as a speaker, you as a writer, say something, you drop this knowledge bomb, and then you kind of move on. There's not a lot of pushback that you necessarily get, and you don't have to address any objections or counterpoints or anything. As you move up the content hierarchy of BS, there's less room. So long form articles, long form blog posts, books, courses, there's even less room for BS there because, these media require you to have rigor. Of course, you can still write a book that's full of fluff that should be actually a 10-page blog post or less. So it's still possible, but it gets harder. And then courses are at the top of the pyramid, especially cohort-based courses, because it's bidirectional, it's live. If you say something and you're not able to back it up, you have a room full of 100 other people there, 100 students who have paid good money to learn from you, that want rigor. And so for you to just say some hand wavy thing and you're not able to back it up, that's not helpful for them. And you can lose control of the course really easily like that. So I like thinking about the content hierarchy of BS because it really keeps instructors accountable, and it keeps them accountable to producing content that's really rigorous. I think the other part of that, the antidote to the BS, is what I call the super specific how. And the super specific how is basically focusing 80% of your course on how and 20% on what and why. This is usually a big mistake of first-time course creators. They'll spend most of their time on the what and the why. So if you're teaching a course on product, for example, you might say, well, product managers have to be good communicators. Here's why, right? And then you talk about why. Your audience already knows that they should be good communicators. Like if you're a product manager, that's kind of basic 101 Captain Obvious. Maybe explaining the why is helpful if what you're saying is something that, challenges a traditional thought or something. But otherwise, you don't really need to spend too much time going into that. You can say one line about communication is important if you're a PM. Here are situations where you'll need to communicate well and why it's tricky. And here's how you handle it, right? How to communicate when you don't have positional authority, for example. How to communicate with technical teams and engineers when you yourself are not technical. How to manage up. How to get buy-in when your idea is still a hypothesis and doesn't have that much data yet, right? How to share your assertions. So these are all topics within the how of how to communicate that are much more helpful for your students. So focusing 80% of that how on the how is a quick shortcut for a heuristic for thinking about how do I make my course really rigorous so that it's something that people can only get in my course and not something that they can just get if they were reading, a random tweet thread.
It's also a forcing function, right? Because it forces you to shorten the length of the content. It can't go on forever. Because usually when you're going on forever, it's not the how you're going on about, it's the what and the why. Mm-hmm. And then that's taking up the bulk of the space. And then that's when people get bored. And that's part of the reason that these courses have such high dropout rates. It's like, oh, I already know this. Like, you're not telling me anything surprising. You're not telling me any practical skills, how to do something differently. You're not positioning that content in a way that's landing for me. You're not giving me examples of how this is used in the real world. I'm not going to pay attention, because the most valuable thing for anybody taking a course, the most valuable thing for anybody even listening to this is your time.
Well said. Switching gears just a bit, I think a lot of the questions that we're getting in the chat have to do with distribution. How do you actually you create a course? How do you actually get eyeballs on that course? I know we've talked about free content. We've talked about growing a newsletter. That was really operative for Shane. But what are some of the growth levers if you're in the education space? What are like the main growth levers if you were to say, hey, ignore 90% of this noise and focus on this 10%? What might that look like, Shane?
Well, I would use a platform like Maven. I mean, I think that that's probably the way to go. You can sort of like create marketing around your course, but the platform will help you set you apart in terms of sort of credibility, in terms of structure, in terms of technology, in terms of rigor around it. I think that all of that is really good, especially when you're starting out. I think it's just a great way to teach, and it's a great way to get known, right? And having the people in your course share your course. I mean, everybody wants to launch a course with like 1,000 students their first time. That's not really how it works. You want to launch a course and you want to have 10 customers that love your product, because those 10 go back and then they go, hey, everybody at my exec team, we had this last year. We launched a course called Decision by Design in June of 2020. Sorry, 2 years ago, June 2020, and people took it. And then what happened was they were like, "Oh, our whole exec team needs to take this." So we satisfied a customer need, and we did it so well and in such a way that was so helpful. And we gave them a vocabulary around it. And we positioned the content, and then it just grew from there, because it's like now I got 100 people at Amazon signed up for it because one person at Amazon took it. So those 10 people, what you really want to do is you don't want to focus on how do I get 1,000 people to sign up. It's how do I get 10, and then how do I exceed their expectations? How do I knock it out of the park for those 10? And then they're going to tell their friends, and then that's how we grow.
Yeah, do an exceptional job for a small group of people that feel that pain point the most, and doing an exceptional job creates that automatic referral mechanism. And
Right. And the other thing you want to do is you want to capture less value than you create. So many people are focused on capturing more value than they create. And that's a recipe for bankruptcy, right? If a business charges more for a product or service than the value they're creating for their customer, they're not going to exist very long. You always want to be under, right? So you're charging less than the value you deliver.
Yeah.
And you have to have a quantitative value statement, right? What is the value of taking this course? What are people going to get out of it? And you know that going in, you have a hypothesis of what that is. And you think you know what it is, but you also have to vet that on the other side, right? Did people actually get that value? And more importantly, it's not that they learned something, it's what's different now because you took this course. What behaviors have you changed?
I got that. Wes, do you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, I think it's really important to think upfront about course market fit. So we've all heard about product market fit, and how important that is. And I think a lot of times people rush into creating a course because they're excited about a topic, or they're personally excited by it. But you really have to think about course market fit in that, am I the right person to be teaching this course to the right target student at the right price point on the right topic? So these different variables have to fit together. If you might be the right person teaching the right topic to the wrong target student, and it's not landing. And no matter what you do, no matter how much top of funnel distribution you get, you're not getting the traction you want because you're marketing to the wrong person, and so that's something that we at Maven really encourage instructors to think about right up front, because what you don't want to happen is to spend a couple months building this amazing course, creating a ton of curriculum and, doing a bunch of marketing, and then realizing at the end that, it's crickets and tumbleweed, radio silence. Just, if you build it, they will come is just a lie. So, you don't want to build it and then hope people will come. You really want to vet upfront whether the course that you are teaching has market demand. That piece is very, very important. And it's going to make your course creation journey much more fulfilling if you vet whether there's market demand at the upstream.
What are some ways to vet that demand?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest ones is thinking about, is the problem that I'm solving for my students in this course a problem that is expensive and hairy and urgent? It's like some people will teach courses on topics that are definitely vitamins and not painkillers. And you can teach on a course that's more of a vitamin, but it's going to be harder to sell that course, and it's going to be harder for your student to justify spending money on your course or trying to get that course reimbursed. So really thinking about, is this solving a problem that's either high frequency or high magnitude in terms of the downside? So magnitude as in every time this problem happens, it's things are falling apart, it's terrible. And how often does this problem happen, right? If it's once in a while, maybe not so bad, but if it's happening all the time, there's way more urgency there. So that's one way to think about it. Another framework I'll share is something that I call outside in, inside out. So if you draw two circles on a Venn diagram, one circle is outside in. So that's thinking about market demand and the outside world that you don't have control over, right? This is just how many people are trying to learn this thing, are interested in this thing, how much market demand is there. And then the other circle, which is smaller, but, overlapped with the main circle, is inside out. As in, when you reflect internally, is this a topic that you can see yourself working on over a long period of time? If there's a topic where there's a lot of market demand, but you're not excited to teach that, then, you're probably not going to last long enough to really see success anyway. And so you really want to find the overlap of outside in and inside out.
Love that framework. Market demand is the outside in, and then inside out is, can you do this for yourself? Is this something that you can actually contribute and do for an extended period of time? And I think Maven is actually a really strong solution for this problem. But how should topic experts approach course building if they don't have an audience? People who are in the trenches, they have the experience, the how-tos, the outcomes, they know how to do it. And they may even be skilled at teaching that material, but they don't have the notoriety, they don't have the authority to just tweet out, hey, I'm starting a course on this topic, come sign up. How should someone like that approach this process?
A lot of our most successful instructors, surprisingly, are people who started out without a very big audience. And so a couple things to think about there. One is you should start building your audience as soon as you can. So that's just something that you should start to do, because it's a great asset for you to have, for you to share your ideas, for products that you might want to sell. So that's one thing. The second is to show up where people are already hanging out. So Shivani Berry is a great example. So Shivani started a course about 1.5 years ago. She was a product manager at PayPal and then I think Intercom afterwards. And she quit her job to be a full-time course creator. She had no audience. I think even now she has, I think, like 1,000 Twitter followers or something. She wasn't posting on Twitter. She wasn't posting on LinkedIn, didn't have an email list. She was a full-time operator. So she wasn't really, thinking about growing her audience. And she decided to be a course creator. And so she started showing up in communities where her students were already hanging out. So she teaches a leadership and management course for women in tech. So she started showing up in women in product communities. She started showing up in women in tech communities. She started doing free workshops at different companies. So she presented at Amazon and Walmart and Instacart and Facebook, right? So she'd show up with this, really meaty 45-minute free workshop where she would teach a topic that was relevant for audience. So she might teach something like how to deal with dominant personalities if you're a collaborative person, right? So that's one of the things she teaches in her course. So she would do a snippet of that to show what her course would be like. And inevitably at the end of that, there would be a couple people who thought, this is amazing. Like, I loved the interaction. Shivani's, I love her teaching style. And they get basically a taste of what the course is like and then want to sign up for that course. Or they get excited and share it back with their team or send it along to different people. She also started posting more regularly on social and building up her email list so that she could build that credibility. So, and another thing she did, she started doing fireside chats with different women in tech. So she interviewed Deb Liu from Ancestry.com, Kitten Scott, Radical Candor, Julie Zhuo. So she interviewed these different women in tech that her target student looked up to. So this was a great way to do lead gen and then be able to nurture her leads afterwards.
What an awesome
and by the
story.
way,
yeah.
Yes, and this actually gets even more awesome with the results.
Yeah.
So her first cohort, I think, was 10 or 15 people. And she basically doubled every couple of months after that. So her next cohort was 30 and then 60 and then 100, 150. And now I think she's staying at the 150 student mark. And her course is $1,800.
That is crazy.
Yeah,
Wow.
really amazing.
Wow.
It's such a great example of if you hustle and if you're willing to put in the effort, right? You have to be willing to put in the effort. It's great to be on a platform like Maven where there's already eyeballs coming on, right? Students coming on to search for courses and filtering, I want to take courses on leadership, or I want to take courses on design, or marketing, or whatever. But you as an instructor have to put in the effort. I think that's really the differentiator that we've seen across hundreds of cohorts in our sample size. It really your course success really depends on, are you willing to put in that effort?
And it sounds like some of the techniques she was using, just listening to your story, are the same ones that have been tried and true for years, right? Real estate agents have been doing this. Lawyers and estate planners have been doing this. Come to my free seminar. I'm going to teach you something. And instead of bringing people to her, she was going to where her audience is, which I like that twist on that. Your audience. Sorry, go ahead.
Go for it, Shane.
I was just going to say, audience is options, right? Your audience is your optionality. And so often we don't think of it that way, but like an audience, people who follow you, believe in you, because of the value you're delivering to them, you can do many things with that. A course is one thing you can do to educate people. Podcasts are another, newsletters are another, a book is another. All of those things are easier when you have an audience already with you.
Yeah, and the framework aligns pretty closely to what you were talking about, Shane. Solve high pain problem for a small group of people. So go where that smaller group hangs out, and go above and beyond, capturing less value than what you're giving, and then when the time does come to have a paid offering,
you can also sort of like look at people who are growing their audience. What are they doing? How are they doing it? Like Twitter, for example, rewards threads. I hate threads. I don't use threads. However, it's algorithmically rewarded and you're punished for single tweets, right? So if you create a thread because you're encouraging, engaging in the audience, now all of a sudden, so who's grown on Twitter? What are they doing that I'm not doing? How are they doing it? And I think you can learn a lot from those people, right? And every platform is different, right? What we often think about is like, I'm going to go on LinkedIn, I'm going to drive people to my email newsletter. Well, no, because the minute you drive people off LinkedIn, you're going to get penalized, right? The same as TikTok, the same as Instagram, the same. So you have to add a lot more value on the platform than you're sort of taking out. So it's not just sort of adding value in a course and charging less. It's also, how do I add value to this platform? And what is value to this platform? What's the algorithm going on behind the scenes that I need to sort of reverse engineer? And you can figure that out pretty quickly by looking at what accounts have grown super fast, what kind of content are they doing, what kind of value are they delivering, how are they delivering it, and how are they positioning that content?
You set me up really well to shill our audience growth session tomorrow with Shaan Puri and Sagar and Jetty. First session of the day. Wes and Shane fully endorse it, as you're hearing on this session. But to your point, reverse engineering what's working and figuring out how can you apply that framework to your own niche. Like, how can you take the algorithmic asymmetries and push them in your favor to build an audience around your own topic. Go ahead.
The biggest problem that I often see, and Wes sort of like talked about this earlier, I think, is people put out content and it might be interesting, but it's not solving a problem. It's not solving a pain point. It's not making anybody's life better. It's just like a fun fact. And so when you think about not only designing a course, but adding value to people, it's like, what problem am I actually solving? And can you answer that question? I think that's a good starting point.
In our remaining minutes, we're going to rapid fire through some audience suggested questions. We'll keep the answers brief so we can bullet through them. We're doing great on time. The first question is, in the context where you're trying to teach clients about new products. So this is switching gears a little bit, not necessarily teaching a consumer how to do like skill building or anything like that. It's like teaching clients about your own products. What have y'all found to be either the right medium or the right way of thinking about it? Some of the examples that were given are like video or skills shop or solution brief or product sheets. Has there been anything that you've seen that sort of stands out as the right fit for this problem? Let's see. Yeah, go ahead, Wes.
Yeah. I think one thing that's worked well for Maven is helping our customers experience our product as soon as possible. So our product is a software platform where you can build cohort-based courses. And so we have a free 2-week bootcamp on how to build a cohort-based course, where you actually get to play with our software, and we add a ton of value on how to think about your curriculum, how to think about course market fit, how to think about your topic. So I think getting customers in the door and kind of playing around with your product and getting the magic moment of your product as soon as possible is something that's worked well for us.
Love
Yeah,
that.
I don't think I have anything to add to that.
Yeah, getting them to that like activation where they can actually experience the value of your product before having to, I guess, do any sort of serious buy-in on their part. Yeah, we certainly use many of that type of thinking in Demand Curve, right? We've got our sample program if you want to just get a sense of, hey, you get the first entire, how to create your growth strategy module completely free. Oh, and by the way, if you want to upgrade to get the rest of it, it's like your product is doing your selling for you at that point. Very useful. What are some of the ways you like to facilitate live session activities that cater to both introverts and extroverts? So, breakout rooms versus like polls and chats. I'm sure both of you have a lot of experience on this topic. So I'll leave it to whoever has the higher conviction in their answer.
I think that'd be you, Wes.
Well, I think Shane and I are both introverts. Are you, Shane?
Oh, totally. Yeah.
Okay. Yes, me too. So I love this question because, not everyone wants to unmute themselves and share in front of 200 people. I definitely don't want to. So I think if you're a course creator, offering ways for people to interact via the Zoom chat is great, right? Some people can type things in and that attracts and encourages a bunch more participation from different personality types. I also think that breaking people up into groups of different sizes is great. So one-on-one, for example, pairing people up into pairs or small groups of 4 to 5 people, that can be a lot more comfortable to speak in than in front of 20 or 100 people. And I also really like solo activities too. So at Maven, we call them guided exercises, where an instructor sets a timer and then everyone just mutes themselves. We might play a little bit of, lo-fi beats music for some inspiration, but everyone is working silently by themselves, and then you move on to the next thing. So I think there's a lot of ways to really draw out introverts too.
I think one of the ways that we've done it, to add to what Wes said, is we allow people to email us after questions, and then we'll put those questions in the next session. So nobody has to actually physically speak up. And often people need to process, right? So it's not only a sort of like introvert extrovert thing. It's like, how do I process information? Some people process talking out loud. Other people need to like digest it and sort of chew on it a little bit. And then, an hour later, they come up with this great question, but they didn't get an opportunity to ask it because maybe the session is closed, the live component's not on anymore, or you've moved on to a different topic. So by the time I've processed it, so if you can capture that and get people to submit those questions to you and you answer them the next time, not only are you getting feedback perhaps on things that weren't explained as clearly as you thought that they were, but you're capturing a really valuable part of your audience that doesn't typically contribute in a way that doesn't put them in a position that's not their strength.
That resonates. Yeah, I feel like I fake, like internally I'm an introvert, but I fake the extrovert when the opportunity calls for it. And so actually both sound, oftentimes I am in like a live course or something, and I don't feel like raising the hand or like going up and doing that. And to Shane, your point, yeah, it's not necessarily even an issue of introvert extrovert. There's just different ways that people process and learn. And so providing the optionality or the space for different learning types can allow for the course experience to cut through for all different types of folks. That's really strong. Last question before we wrap it up on this session. How do you think about educating and growing, or I guess educating team members, like doing, rather than kind of solo one-off skill building type things? If we're talking about a marketing team of, let's say, 9 people, how should they think about upskilling, and what are sort of the best practices for leveling up a team? Let's say Shane.
Well, I think about this maybe a little bit differently, right? I mean, the tendency that I've seen is to put all these people in the same course, even in the same cohort. When we used to run in-person sessions, we actually limited the number of people you could send from the same company. And so when we did physical in-person, I should differentiate that, physical in-person sessions, we would limit that you can only have 3 people from the same company, and we would limit the number of people to 50. And the reason that we did that is because twofold. One, we don't want them dominating the conversation with their internal language, their internal baggage, their internal sort of like, I already know you, I'm friendly with you. So they're automatically in a different place. Also, their boss or colleagues might be in the class, so there might be some posturing instead of actually learning, right? There's all these dynamics that you don't see at play when you have this happen. The other thing that I'll just say here, and Wes will probably have something a lot smarter to say about this, is the tendency is to put everybody in the same course. The problem with that is what I call the stormtrooper problem, which is if everybody in your team takes the same course and you hire people that look the same, think the same, and then you try to solve the same problem, you're all going to be looking at the problem through a different lens. So you almost want people to take different courses to experience different methods, different types of learning, different approaches to the problem, so that when you're facing a problem, when they're facing a problem, well, now they're going to look at the problem differently and they're going to come up with different solutions. Because if the world looks the same to everybody, we're going to come up with the same solutions. And that just doesn't work.
Super problem. That's going to be the one-liner that sticks in everybody's heads. Coming out.
Well, I can explain this from
that? Yeah.
Well, from the context that I used to work for an intelligence agency, one of those 3-letter agencies that you can't actually repeat without like going to jail. But the problem with this is, like, in the post-Snowden, post-Bradley Manning world, security clearances all started to look the same, right? Hiring people that haven't gotten in trouble, haven't done anything, good grades, go to a B school. And then when they come in, they're all given this platform for learning, right? Well, here are the courses you need to take. Here are the experiences you have. And then all of a sudden you fast forward 10 years, they've all had the same courses. They've all had the same experiences, and they get into a room to solve a problem and they all look at the problem the same way.
Got it. Yeah, it's there's a lot of guessing going on in the chat about which 3-letter agency it is. We've got Better Business Bureau, we've got AAA. So I feel like we're getting warmer. Wes, would love to hear your take on team upskilling.
The DMV.
The DMV. There you go.
As a front. Yeah. In terms of upskilling, I love Shane's points about being exposed to different sources of inspiration. I think that's fantastic. I think sometimes there's benefit in having shared language. So shared baseline, shared language around different frameworks, mindsets. I think that can be very helpful. I think beyond learning those in courses or all reading some books, I think the ongoing practice of thinking rigorously and giving each other permission to call each other out when there is shoddy logic is very, very useful. So rigorous thinking is a value that we have at Maven. And what that means is that any idea goes from anyone. You don't have to be, in product to suggest a product idea. You don't have to be in, on the ops side to suggest improvement. But everyone's ideas are scrutinized and we poke holes in it to make sure that the logic holds and the logic is sound before just going with it. And that is true if the idea comes from me or from, from Gagan Biani or my co-founder CEO or whoever else. And so that really encourages a culture where people are raising their hands and sharing, but also not just sharing random ideas, that are a flash in the pan of, oh, I saw this competitor doing this thing, we should do it too, right? It's not just that. It's bringing an idea to the table and being ready to explain your rationale and your thought process of why this is going to benefit the business. What are potential second order effects from doing this? What are trade-offs? What are potential downsides or risks? How are ways that we can do this small to test it out first? What would you do if you were, to start this tomorrow, for example, right? So thinking through a couple key questions around how does this work? I think that culture is so powerful for allowing a bunch of smart people who are already working together to basically sharpen each other. It goes to the point of the quote, iron sharpens iron. If you hired a bunch of smart people, let them sharpen each other.
Iron sharpens iron. Oh my gosh, the one-liners. These are some incredible quotables that I feel like are going to be. We're going to see these all over the internet now. So I'm excited. Maybe not in thread form, Shane, but certainly in tweet form. Well, thank you both so much. This was a ton of fun. We could go on for another 2 hours, and I'm sure people would love to hear it. But yeah, thank you both so much for your time. Let the people know what you have going on in your life and how they can get in touch. Why don't we start with you, Wes?
Yeah, Maven just did a relaunch a couple weeks ago where we launched over 100 courses that are coming up in the next couple of weeks. Before that, at any given time, we had about 5 courses live. And so the 100 is a really big jump. And we're really excited to have a bunch of courses around topics like product, marketing, leadership, technical skills, design. So huge range of topics. We have instructors. Actually, I have a list of some of our instructors. There's so many courses now that I had to write it down on a little piece of paper. So
let's hear it. Let's hear it. Yeah.
All right. Okay. AI product lead at Meta, UX design lead at Twitter, VP of marketing at SparkToro. These are instructors for these courses. COO at Bridgewater, VP of sales at Yelp, EIR at First Round, CMO of McDonald's Latin America, and global head of behavioral science at Walmart. So really interesting experts with amazing backgrounds.
I've heard of some of those. Yeah. I've heard of some of those companies before.
Yeah, so really stoked. So go check out maven.com and see if there's any courses you're excited about.
Thank you, Wes. Shane?
Can I just say how amazing it is to be alive in 2022, where for maybe, the first time in human history, you have access to the best people in the world at their craft on demand. So it used to be if you lucked out, right, and you worked for Henry Ford or something, you could get some of this, you worked for a master, you could learn a little bit from working with them, but that's all luck, right? You could make it happen, but I mean, it was pretty impractical. And now you can get the top people at all these companies on one platform where you have them teaching you these on-demand skills, and they're the best in the world at what they do. I just think that my mind is blown by the fact that we can do this.
It's truly insane. It really is. I mean, it's worth taking a step back and letting it soak in, because never before in human history have we had this. And I know Shane won't toot his own horn, so I'll just quickly shout out Knowledge Project, Farnham Street. Basically, if you want to be smarter as a human being, like, go and consume Shane's content. And of course, all things that Wes does. If you want to especially go deeper on this topic, education growth, Wes puts out a ton of awesome. I mean, we've heard some incredible frameworks today, but definitely go much deeper on Wes. Follow her on Twitter, and I'm sure you'll enjoy the rabbit hole that you find yourself in. Thank you both very, very much. We will be starting product-led growth in about 5 minutes with Wes Bush and Ryan Kim. And yeah, I'll see you both backstage momentarily.